Hi there, everybody, and welcome to day 2 of Digital Outcomes 2023. I'm Philip Ideson, the founder and managing director of Art of Procurement, and I want to thank you so much for joining us today. Now, we have 4 sessions lined up for you today. We're going to discuss in our first session in a moment about reframing failure. We're going to discuss top performance concerns of executives. We're going to dig into the health of the procurement tech ecosystem, and we'll close out by considering how to most effectively use automation, particularly in recessionary times. All these sessions are really going to be based around what the theme of the event is, which is, how do we think about our investments in procurement technology and, consider not necessarily the outcomes in procurement we want to drive, but the outcomes we want to drive for the business, because then that's where we make the most impact. And it kind of creates this virtuous circle then of being able to get more investment to then invest in more procurement technology. So those are all the focus areas of today's conversation. Before we do start, I do want to thank today's sponsors, without whom events like Digital Outcomes really wouldn't be possible. I said at the beginning yesterday, we put so much work behind the scenes into these events. We have 44 pages, I think, of a run of show, which is all the things that go in behind the scenes to making today's event possible. So I want to thank Spend HQ, Pear Angusta, and Opstream for making all this possible. Spend HQ and Pear Angusta are a first-of-its-kind end-to-end solution to understand spend, identify opportunities, implement them, and then measure procurement's contribution, while Opstream is an AI-driven platform that streamlines and accelerates cross-organizational workflows. Throughout each of our sessions today, I do want to encourage questions. There should be a question box underneath this video in the platform that you're watching Digital Outcomes in. If you pop a question in there, those will come here into the studio. And as time allows, and if time allows, we'll bring on some of those questions onto the screen as we go through each one of our conversations. Now, just a note in terms of navigation, so some logistics for the event. You should at any time be able to click on agenda and see the session that is in progress, or there's a green bar at the top of your browser, which also shows the session in progress. At the end of each session, we'll also auto-direct you into the next room for the next session. You'll also see, if you're not able to attend all of the sessions, pretty much immediately after a session is completed, then they actually become available to watch again. So you scroll down on the agenda page to the bottom, you'll see all of the sessions, for example, from yesterday that are already there. So if you do miss something, then that is a way to get it. And if you enjoy today's sessions, you think that your peers may value watching some of these videos, do encourage them to register. If they can't attend the actual in-person, they can go and watch those videos again on demand. And that registration page is open throughout the event today. So with all that being said, let's go into the first session of the day. Hi there, and welcome to the first session of the day. And today's first session is titled Reframing Failure, There's Always a Way. And before I introduce my guest, Gavin, to you, I just want to give a little bit of context for today's this first session. So we're really, as we've experienced, a lot of us throughout our careers, digital transformation is really hard. According to a 2020 study by BCG, 70% of transformation projects fall short of expectations. This means that transformations are more likely to fail than to succeed, but we need to succeed. Failure isn't an option. So if it's not avoidable, if failure is not avoidable, then procurement really needs to rethink or reframe how they perceive what success looks like. And so I'd like to introduce Gavin Mlinar. Gavin is the founder and CEO of Blacklisted Consulting. He's an experienced procurement executive. He's somebody that we've talked to on our Sourcing Hero podcast as well. And Gavin, you're always up for a challenge, including climbing the equivalent vertical feat of Mount Everest. In doing so, I think you know that you may have to fail 99 times before finding success or reaching your goal. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that. So first of all, Gavin, welcome to Digital Outcomes.
Thanks, Philip. So happy to be here. I greatly appreciate it.
And so I kind of teed it up in the introduction there. You're definitely a next level adventurer. I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about, well, first of all, what Everest 29,029, I guess, is, and your experience with that.
Sure. So my wife and I like to vacation together. We've been married more than 16 years. Our wedding anniversary is in June. And during COVID lockdown, we were locked down. We couldn't do our trips. We had spring breaks canceled and family vacations canceled and anniversary trips canceled. We said, you know what? Let's really challenge ourselves. We've been locked in our house. We haven't exercised as much as we'd like to. We'd like to get outdoors more. And we discovered the Everest 29029 challenge, which is held at about 5 ski areas every year. For about 250 people, and you have 36 hours to hike the equivalent vertical feet of Mount Everest, which is 29,029 feet. So we went to Snow Basin, Utah last August. It's a 2.3 mile climb up the ski mountain. Each climb up is 2,300 vertical feet. When you get to the top, you're actually at the top of the gondola. You ride the gondola down, turn right, and go back up again. And if and when you do it 13 times, you have actually climbed the equivalent vertical feet of Mount Everest.
That sounds like a pretty intensive. And I was trying to do the mental arithmetic on how many laps you had to do that. I'm sure sitting in that a gondola coming down is probably feels better and better each time that you take that journey before heading back up again.
So we had an interesting experience, and this was one of the many instances where I've had to quote unquote reframe failure. So it's 13 hikes up. That's a lot of vertical feet. Most people don't hike hills that steep. You've probably never even seen them. I had trained for 14 months. I did all the exercise that the event organizers told me to do. They give you a 20-week training plan, tell you what to do every day. Get to talk to a nutritionist to understand what your body is going to go through during this endurance challenge. Get to talk to a hydration expert that tells you how much you sweat and how much you need to drink. I planned this out. I did everything they asked me to do. On the second climb up, my legs cramped.
Right.
On the third climb up, they cramped a lot. On the fourth climb up, I could barely walk. Whereas coaches on the mountain, my wife asked them to help me. Went down the gondola and I fainted. So I'd only done 4, and I was there to climb Mount Everest, go do all 13 hikes. So I went to the recovery area where some wonderful people took care of me for a couple hours. My wife did 2 more hikes up. When she came down, she was so dehydrated, she needed IV. It progressed to a poorer stage, so I actually drove her to the emergency room. So this now sounds wonderful, right?
It's getting worse by the second, I think.
She took 2 more bags of fluid to the emergency room. Came back to the mountain, slept for a couple hours. I got up and I started hiking again. So I was there. There was still time on the clock. I had a lot of rest at this point after spending time with my wife at the hospital, and went up again. I come down. My wife's there, said, I want to do this with you. I said, well, you're 1 ahead of me. Why don't you just rest more? And I'll come back down, see how I feel. So I did another one, came back down. She was ready to go. So we completed the 7th together and just got about halfway. I was devastated because I'd put so much time and effort into this. I was convinced I was an endurance athlete that could conquer Everest. And I spoke to a lot of people. I spoke to the coaches on the mountain. And I really had to reframe the entire experience and think about what went well. And what the positives were from fainting and taking my wife to the emergency room. So I exercised a lot for 14 months. I lost 20 pounds. I got into some of the best shape in my life. I spent a lot of time in nature. I spent time in nature with my wife. We brought our kids out with us. That is just precious time. On the mountain, I met the most incredibly positive and supportive people I have ever encountered. Just hugging you, high-fiving you, cheering for you. There's a full-time MC.
Yeah.
voice of the mountain who's rooting for you. Oh, look who's getting off the gondola. Gavin's back. I can't believe he's back. He fainted yesterday. This is so amazing. And it's not a competition. It's a challenge. It doesn't matter if you finish it in 18 hours or 36 hours. You still have accomplished the same goal. So the end result of not completing Everest, sure, I thought about that for a couple of weeks, but there were so many more positives about the journey and the experience that I'm now hooked. So I've actually signed up to do this twice this year. I'm going back to Snow Basin. There's my wife and me.
Yeah, I was going to put the picture up to show you in action, and then I was actually going to ask if you.
Seventh. We completed that. So that's me after fainting and my wife after going to the ER, and we're still smiling with our hands up.
I guess that's all you can do, right?
Absolutely. So I think you could easily think of those two stories. Holy cow, I spent 14 months and I didn't climb Mount Everest. What a disaster. Or this was an incredible experience, spending time in nature, getting in excellent shape, meeting fantastic people, having an experience of a lifetime, and wanting to do it again.
Yeah. Now, would you do anything different? Like the learnings that you've done it now, you've attempted it now. I think this is as we start to kind of look at what we can learn from this from a digital transformation perspective. How do you build on that experience and say, well, okay, now I've had that experience, I'm going to try again, and maybe there's a few things I'll do differently next time.
Absolutely. So I like to look at each experience, good or bad, as a learning experience. So I learned that I didn't understand heart rate zone training, and I wasn't able to do an endurance challenge keeping my heart rate low. So I burned less calories, used less fuel, used less hydration. So I've hired an endurance coach. I have a heart rate monitor. I'm also taking boxing classes because that's super high intensity training. And we watch my heart rate monitor during the class. It goes up. And they go, okay, breathe it down to green. As soon as it's in green, go again. I'm spending more time on nutrition to understand just what I'm eating and how it impacts my body. So yeah, I learned a lot, and I'm doing it again twice this year.
You're signing up for more trouble. So I want to kind of I want to take the experiences. I think that the concept of looking at something and taking the positive rather than the negative, and then applying those positives to next time around to be even more effective is something that it's very much mindset driven. It's not so easy in the moment sometimes when you're up the mountain that seventh time to be thinking about the positives as opposed to the negatives. I want to talk about in the context of digital transformation that we're talking about at this event. What does failure look like when we apply kind of that to the work environment, the transformation environment, and how do we know when we've failed?
So I'm going to give an extreme answer and then try and talk back through it. Failure is when you quit.
Yeah.
To me, that's it. When you quit, that's when you fail. Because as I said, it's a learning experience.
Yeah.
And when you gave great insight that 70% of transformation projects are considered failures. A transformation project is most likely something your business is trying to do for the first time. So when we always talk, some companies talk about crawl, walk, run as we move through these projects and the evolution of it. Well, when you were a baby and you attempted to crawl for the first time, did you crawl for the first time? You probably did not.
No, I know our kids spent a lot of time falling flat on their face.
Right. When you attempted to walk for the first time, were you successful? So there's so many things in life that are not successful the first time you try them. I don't understand why we're not taking this approach in the corporate setting. Because you're doing something for the first time in a corporate setting with a lot of people, with expected business outcomes. Like, okay, I'm going to walk. You figure it out eventually. Why don't you have more time to figure out a digital transformation?
Yeah. So should we, sorry to jump in, should we be planning for failure at the very beginning so that, and I want to say when rather than if something occurs, then that becomes not as catastrophic as it possibly could be, or perceived as being catastrophic because it wasn't planned for?
So nobody's perfect. So I think planning is crucial and critical, as long as you have the understanding that your plan is likely to not be perfect.
Yeah.
There are some fixed things you can probably control, and there are some variables you'll never be able to control. So as long as you go into it understanding that and being ready to pivot, I mean, you have things like fail fast. I really liked the session yesterday with the 100-day pilot.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's ways to take things in smaller chunks. And we have all our big catchphrases, don't boil the ocean. I mean, things are not going to happen when they're too grandiose. So I do think it's incredibly important to plan and to get alignment on the plan and to communicate that plan. And I really think that one of the most critical factors for transformation projects, from my personal experience, has been around communication.
Yeah.
It is impossible to over communicate.
Yeah.
But when I have missed expectations, it's because I missed something in the communication plan. I didn't talk to an executive at the right time. I didn't communicate to the team at the right time or a stakeholder at the right time. I made an assumption instead of communicating. So to me, like, the planning and the communication is really key.
Yeah, and it's easier to not communicate when things aren't going so well as well, isn't it? And
Exactly.
to hide behind your project plan in the hope that things will improve.
Exactly. I think one of the leaders I respect a lot always told me, no surprises.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care, good, bad. I don't care if it's Christmas Day. I don't care if it's my birthday, a holiday. I don't care if I'm on vacation. Just no surprises. Like, don't wait till I'm back. I need to know, and I need to know what I'm going into. And again, good or bad, no surprises. That has really helped me with some of these larger projects and initiatives. Can be a very difficult conversation, but like, you do not want your leader, the project leader, the executive sponsor, to be surprised.
Mm-hmm. Now we have a question that came in. I'm going to bring it up on screen here. How can we better understand our company's culture or attitude towards the idea of failure?
So this does take some time. And I think I've even been told, starting at a new company, it can take 3 to 6 months. Sometimes it might take up to a year to truly understand the company's culture and how it operates. I did hear it yesterday as well, but I always say, try and understand the business and speak its language.
Yeah.
And I think that's also part of understanding your company's culture and being able to speak that language. I'm trying to always reframe failure and turn it into a learning experience or something positive. So when things are derailed, when things go off track, delayed, I like to quickly identify the problem. Remember, I said no surprises.
Mm-hmm.
But then I want to make sure that the team has come up with solutions, that the leadership, the project team, the business, everyone understands that, okay, I have this team. They've communicated that things may not be going perfectly, but they have solutions. They're not quitting. They're not stopping. They're coming forward with solutions. These are talented people that work for the company, talented people that were assigned to the project. Let's make sure they have a voice and they can bring forward those solutions. And I think really somewhere between 50 and 75, maybe even 80, 90% of the time, people have the ability to make those changes themselves or to keep solutioning, keep moving things forward. I think people have a preconceived notion that they always need direction from the leader. The leaders are busy. They just want to know that the team has a solution and it's going to keep moving forward. There's very few cases where a leader needs to step in and say, okay, this happened. We're going to now go do this. Like, that's kind of micromanaging. You want the team to solution. So I just feel like people, they work the plan, they communicate. If they keep communicating, even communicating the problem, but do so with solutions, that sort of helps alleviate this notion of failure. Because you're not saying you failed, and you're not saying you quit. You're saying, I have a challenge, I have a situation, but I have solutions, and I'm going to keep working on it.
And so when you communicate an issue, a point of failure that has occurred, do you have a rule of thumb of how quickly you want to be able to turn that around into solutions as you communicate? Because sometimes, in an ideal world, you want to communicate what the solution is as soon as the problem occurs. But the reality is you often need to do some digging into what the alternatives are. How quickly do you try and turn that around?
So if you are honest and truthful with what is happening, and you give that exact example, Philip, that we've identified an issue, the team is now going to dissect this issue, analyze this issue, and come back with a couple solutions, then all you have done is communicated and changed your plan. So it's still okay.
Yeah. Now, I want to encourage anybody to ask any questions. We are getting some questions through. I have one more to bring on the screen here. How did you lean on the 29029 community to help you reframe that feeling of failure to something more positive?
So the 29029 founders have really created something special, because it's not a competition. There's not first, second, third place. They have a no, I don't want to curse, a no jerk rule. So a no jerk rule. And one of the first or second things they're always talking about is the community and the support.
Yeah.
And I'm not kidding. They're high-fiving you. They're hugging you. There's people with cowbells. They're calling out your name. They're cheering for you. If you have a problem, someone is there. They have this sixth sense where they know who's struggling. And very quickly, all of a sudden, there's a coach. All of a sudden, there's the nutritionist. All of a sudden, there's a medic. I don't know how they do it. It's absolutely amazing. But they just support you, whatever you need. They're trained in supporting you. I mean, you're putting yourself through a physical and mental challenge. It's not easy. Just transformation's not easy. Hiking a mountain is not easy. And most people have never done anything like this.
So it's all about creating the environment where people are not afraid. Well, one, like you say, it's not a competition, but to reduce the fear of failure, I think. Have you experienced in this kind of digital transformation corporate environment where you've been able to, or you've seen other folks do a really good job of creating this safe space for people? And perhaps if you have, because it's not possible necessarily to have, everybody going around hugging and encouraging each other, but you can create an environment where somebody's not afraid to step up and say, hey, there's a problem here.
I think so. I wish every company would do this. And I tried to look, I always forget who said this quote, but for me, you're automatically forgiven for making a mistake, because you can't break through and you can't really push some of these digital transformations forward and hard and aggressively when on a time frame that a lot of companies want, unless you're willing to push, unless you're willing to take some risk, and unless the team is willing to be cohesive and talk. So the safe space to me is to make sure people understand they have a voice and that voice is valued. I think when people feel valued, then they're more comfortable speaking up. So it's those little everyone's different, but understanding how the team members or your colleagues, what makes them feel good, what makes them feel valued. That's when I think you have the breakthrough performance. People aren't worried about, oh my goodness, if this project is late by a week, I'm getting fired. I can't speak up because then it looks like I'm going against the project sponsor.
Yeah.
I mean, you all work for the same company. You're all looking for the same outcomes. You should want to hear a diverse set of opinions, voices, how those unique experiences have shaped each and every one of us to provide value back into the project. There's no one set way of doing anything. So it is culture. Culture is so key.
Yeah, as I think about when I was a practitioner at not the executive level within organizations, and I felt the leader perhaps wasn't open to listening to feedback, then I'd always look for advocates. Who are the folks who are connected and can influence the leader, who I can have a relationship with, and almost use those as a conduit for some of those conversations in environments where you feel like you don't necessarily have the direct line.
And I really saw it. I really saw this expansive plan and a plan that leads to project success working for a Japanese company.
Mm-hmm.
The timelines and expectations for most projects are very realistic.
Yeah.
So anyone working on that project team immediately feels that the end goal is achievable. I mean, there was an example where a P2P solution was being deployed across the enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
Most P2P solutions being deployed across the enterprise, stakeholders want completed in 6 months or a year or 18 months. It's a very quick time frame. This was 5 years.
Right.
But it was 5 years from project conception to project completion. So that means many people need to discuss the project.
Mm-hmm.
Then once there's consensus that, yes, we're going to do this, then you get the project team together. Then you start to scope it out, process mapping, demos, research the industry, research the market, run an RFP, select who you're going to go with, demo it in a sandbox, make sure it's going to work, expand the project team, build the timeline. Like, who doesn't think they can get a P2P rolled out in 5 years?
Yeah.
So the projects are set up to be successful in that culture. Where people get into trouble is if they communicate something and don't do it. So you communicate a timeline, you communicate an outcome, you communicate a deliverable, and you miss it. Mm-hmm. That's where you have trouble in a Japanese culture. But if you do what you say and you follow the plan and you talk to the people that are part of the project, I mean, 5 years is great. I don't know who wouldn't take that.
And can you imagine? And that makes me think, because oftentimes, most times, we want it done tomorrow rather than 5 years. So we're building in risk factors from the beginning, and perhaps a successful project could be where you're identifying those risks up front and saying these are the points of failure. And so there's some, not necessarily anticipation, but perhaps some planning around it, perhaps some, there's seeing that these choke points, if you will, so that it's not as much of a surprise. It's not necessarily giving you an excuse, but so it's not as much of a surprise if there are challenges to overcome, at those certain points, because we're introducing risk into the process. We've got about 3 or 4 minutes. I've got a ton of interesting questions. So let me just see which ones to pop in. Here's an interesting one. Is it possible to learn to be positive in difficult circumstances like training, or does that have to be a natural inclination?
No, you can absolutely learn it. My wife used to call me the parade rainer, because I could see everything that was going to go wrong, and I was negative about it. But that's how I processed all these data points to come up with the outcome or the solution. So I had to learn. I started with positive leadership, just how to always be positive as a manager, how to lead with positivity, how to talk to people with positivity. Again, work is hard. Transformation is hard. You're probably spending more time with colleagues than you are with your family. Work should be a positive experience. So this is something you can absolutely, I'd say it's probably not most people's natural inclination to be positive, especially in difficult situations.
No, I think from my personal experience, I for a long time didn't really do much from a running perspective or exercise and all those things, and then kind of decided that I had to do something about that and change. And that's something that it wasn't inside of me that I was somebody who was positive. It was like, I need to do something. So then it's like, I need to figure out a way to change my mindset and to believe that something is possible, and then go on that journey. And it's a change in yourself as opposed to just having that inclination.
Right. And I did write down, I looked up the definition of learning. So it's the acquisition of knowledge or skills through experience, study, or by being taught.
Yeah.
So you
So
can
you can be
learn.
taught. Yeah.
Anyone can be taught.
Let me see if which one of these questions to bring up. Here we go. The number of trips up and down an incline is definite, but digital transformation is a lot more subjective. How do we know, or perhaps what are some things that you look for to determine if our mission's at risk in a digital transformation journey?
I understand the question. I think it's very important to have clarity on the expected outcome and to work towards that. And that's either the expected business outcome, the cultural outcome. And I think that's less subjective. But I think when you are on these digital journeys and you don't have clarity on the expected outcome, that's where you're not able to have a clear plan. That's where communication might not be as good. You don't know the expected outcome. How can you communicate how things are going? So that's an overly simple answer to a hard question. But I'm very inquisitive and ask the teams to be inquisitive. And if I don't understand the expected outcome, I'm going to keep asking questions until I do.
All right, we might have time for one more quick question. Can not taking well-informed risk be a form of failure?
Cannot taking well-informed risk be a form of failure?
Like, should we be taking risks? Or
if that's quitting, so I said my only view of failure is when you quit.
Yeah.
So if you quit, then I would say that's probably failure. If you're not taking well-informed risks because you're trying something else or trying a different process or trying to tweak your plan, then you haven't quit and you're still trying.
Yeah.
So it is, to me, it's that simple. Failure is quitting. Everything else is learning.
All right. Well, let's wrap things up there, Gavin. I really appreciate your time today, and sharing with us your experience. And I think that the mindset of failure and accepting that things don't necessarily always happen the way that you want them to do, but how you respond to that is the most important. And kind of applying that experience of climbing up a mountain into a digital transformation. And I have to say, so when's your next attempt?
I'm retrying Snow Basin, Utah in August, and then I signed up to try Stratton, Vermont in October.
So good luck in August, and you'll have to keep us posted on the journey.
Thank you. I will.
Well, again, one last time, thank you very much, Gavin, for joining us. I want to tell everybody in the audience that our next session starts in about 6 minutes' time at 10:40 a.m. US Eastern Time. Kelly will be joined by Pierre Lepre, the Chief Product Officer of Spend HQ and founder of Pear Angusta, also by Bleston Curian, the Procurement Director of Digital and Data Science at Thermo Fisher, and Keith Bartholomew, Global VP and CFO of Product and Technology at Brinks, to talk about top performance. Stay here in the live feed, and we'll auto direct you into that next session, or go to the agenda page and you should find it there. One last time, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us in this session today. Thanks, Gavin.
Bye-bye.